it becomes such a desensitized thing, it becomes so accepted that victims are disabled from being able to speak out and say that that was hurtful, or that was a situation where that is not appropriate, or something like that. Ray Langton believes that this is something that will actually hurt their right to free speech, and so we need to temper such extreme speech on the side of the joke tellers as to hold that back. The second counterargument that we want to look at really gets at the essence of this question, this idea of humor being used as a kind of defense. The counterargument is the idea of catharsis, particularly in public settings. We think it can provide it in a very limited circumstance where it's a controlled setting. So the counterargument would go that if you start saying this in a public setting, you bring it back, like the N-word was brought back, or some situation like that. But actually our response is that the N-word was not brought back. In fact, the NAACP does not advocate using it in public settings. What we believe is that if you try to use this phrase in public settings and try to take it back, if you try to take it back in public settings, you're actually leading to a confusing situation for listeners. They all of a sudden say, oh, can I say the N-word as well? Can I make rape jokes as well? Is this something that is acceptable? And we say, no, this leads to a further confusion that will further hurt the socially diminished categories, that will further hurt victims, because it will lead to this desensitized nature where, oh, is it okay? Is it not okay? Is it only okay for victims? Is it only okay for victims in public settings? So this leads us to our recommended course of action, which Sarah is going to emphasize is in a very limited circumstance. We want to emphasize our answer is not yes very often. It's very limited, but we do want to add that nuance to our answer. With that, Sarah's going to give our recommended course of action.
Because, as the question says, laughter can function as a way to escape from this great evil. We do believe that to a certain degree, catharsis is an acceptable response, and that we do believe that there are some situations only when by victims are they able to use that kind of humor to cope. However, that is why, because we don't want to lead to this confusion, we don't want to lead to this pervasiveness of rape humor being in our society, that we have limited it thusly, and that we have said that only when it is in a controlled environment is it morally acceptable to be used. And so with that, I'm going to give it to James, who's going to wrap us up.
All right, so to recover the case, we have answered that yes, in a very limited circumstance, humor can be an acceptable defensive form with practical and moral function. We've given context to the three types, only one of which we endorse. We've given two moral theories of Lawrence Thomas and the virtues of empathy and courage. Then we dealt with two counter-arguments, that of free speech, countered by Ray Langton, and humor as catharsis in public, which we said was confusing for all of the audience. Finally, we've given a recommended course of action that cathartic rape humor is acceptable in only a very controlled circumstance, and thus it stands. We look forward to the contributions of Washington State.